I want to welcome to the program a really smart lady. And if you're interested in knowing about a wide range of issues, you better listen up because she knows what she's talking about. She's currently a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. You may remember her name when she was Deputy National Security Advisor under the Trump administration. Also moved over to the Department of Energy late in the administration. Victoria Coates, welcome.
Thank you, fellas, for having me on.
Listen, it's a good time to have you on because there's a bunch of complicated issues out there that, frankly, I'm not sure that this assembled group has the firepower to tackle on our own, shall we say. But I know you do. And I know you're doing a lot of stuff with energy at Heritage. Let's just start there, right? I mean, we're all acquainted with the incredible incompetence of this administration and how they've prioritized domestic energy production, how that's affected everything from gas prices to, I assume, winter heating and everything, and then becoming more reliant on the Middle East, which you have, a lot of exposure and interest, and I think you even lived in Saudi Arabia at one point. So just give us
not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, give us your take on all this.
Well, first you have to start with the Italian Renaissance art history PhD.
Okay.
That's the critical thing.
I missed that.
If you don't have that, you can't really get into energy policy.
Yeah, that's important.
So,
are you going to get 10 grand off on that
deal? At least. But no, it was interesting because I know you guys have been a little bit harsh on the art historians in terms of majors.
We have been a touch. Did you feel seen on that deal?
It's a little bit like the Italians.
Yeah, we've had a lot for them too.
You feel persecuted, but it was just a quick point I wanted to make because art history is basically history with pictures, and one of the first gifts I brought y'all was my book, which is a history of democracy in 10 works of art. And the premise of it is that if you want to know about ancient Athens, you can read Thucydides. I strongly encourage you to do so. But if you read Thucydides and you look at the Parthenon, you're going to have a better sense of what it was. So this is
how you know you're dealing with a smart person. Right?
And notice how I led with the book plug?
Yeah, well, now I appreciate it.
You got to admire that.
Listen, it's a well-formulated, formidable book, too. I mean, this thing's got
Roger
weight to
Kimball, Encounter Books, God bless him. But, so anyway, you do start with an art historian, but where we are with energy is energy is the universal currency right now. You can't do anything if you can't make something run. It's in a way, it's food. You're going to break down. People are going to die if you don't have sufficient electricity. And what is less well understood is how you produce electricity. There are plugs all around us.
Right.
Does it I mean, I'm from Philadelphia. Does it come from the sky? Do you hold up a key?
I saw a picture on Twitter of a car, an electric car, running with a gas generator behind it. Because they're having those blackouts right now.
And when you get a major snowstorm and the big backups in Virginia, what do? Your car runs down. If you don't have a hybrid, you're done. You're just sitting on the
you're just there.
road. And you can't run your heat. You can't do anything. You can't go get a can of something. There's not a cord long enough. So this is really not very well thought out. And so when you have people like Secretary Granholm going out and saying, everyone can just get an electric vehicle, and our friends...
This lady is crazy. She's the worst.
The worst.
It's really an embarrassment. I mean, I'm very close to Secretary Perry. I worked for Secretary Brouillette. I mean, these are serious professionals who understand the industry, who understand the broader responsibilities of the department. She's out to lunch.
Yeah.
Right.
If you'll give me one little digression to Saudi Arabia again, when the president went over in July, you look at the pictures, the big table with Mohammed bin Salman with the Crown Prince. President and the Crown Prince across the table from each other. To the Crown Prince's right is Prince Abdulaziz, his half-brother, who's the energy minister. Granholm was in Singapore tweeting about electric vehicles. You didn't bring your A-team. You're not serious. Like MBS.
Well, I don't think they get it, though, right? I mean, what's so interesting about your background is it's a fusion of national security and energy where it should be, to be honest with you. Because it is sort of one and the same in many, many, many ways. And this administration doesn't seem to understand that at all.
No, I mean, it's... Now, to be charitable to them, which is hard, but one tries, it's new that energy would be in the national security bucket. But we're looking at all sorts of things now: immigration, food security, information.
Yeah.
And so one of my charges to Heritage right now is we have to stop using the words foreign policy. That's, pinkies up, foggy bottom, UN,
Right.
stuff that makes people's eyes, countries they've never heard of, their eyes glaze over. But if you say, you're paying too much for the pump because we're screwing up and we don't have the influence we used to have in the Middle East, for example, they say, oh, why don't we have said influence? I'm like, well, we could, but we're bringing the wrong people on ill-advised trips. So I think that is the way to make these issues relevant.
Yeah, no,
all
that's a really good
Americans.
point. And also, as I say, you would think if you were begging Saudi Arabia for oil that maybe the energy person may have something to say about that.
And especially, when somebody like Tony Blinken, who's been around the block, looks at that table and looks at who's sitting where.
Yeah.
Who MBS puts to his right is not a random decision. The Saudis know a thing or two about protocol. And if Abdulaziz is sitting there, that means they're coming to talk business. And you didn't.
No, certainly not. Well, I mean, they can just kind of sort of sit back and watch us self-immolate over this issue, right? I mean, everything from the total viewpoint of elimination of fossil fuels to becoming reliant basically on China for solar panels and everything else and electric batteries. And I mean, it's wild, right? I mean, you don't have to actually be an expert to understand that doesn't make any sense.
No, you can be an art historian and you can figure this out. It is not hard. But what you want to look at is, we have this huge strategic advantage over China. China is always going to be energy vulnerable. They can't fix their problem. So they're going to need to import, which is why they're so excited about getting lots of Russian imports recently. But for us, we have not an unlimited, but certainly an enormous. We're one of the big three now with the Saudis and the Russians. We are a producing nation. And this administration is insisting we're a consuming nation. So they're going to everyone from Iran and Venezuela. The Saudis is particularly frustrating to me because they would prefer to coordinate with us. They don't want us to fail. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons both of us. It'd be
pretty bad news for them.
It would be terrible news. So I would not cast them as an adversary in any way, but they're just befuddled by why we wouldn't, if we want to bring prices down. And we did this with the Iran sanctions. When we took those down, we took their exports down to zero. We worked directly with the Saudis. That was my PhD in Saudi crude levels and what you could refine where and how many barrels you could produce. But you can get to a point if you work with them, so you satisfy China's needs, India's needs, but if you don't work with them, you just ask them for more and you bludgeon them, they're not going to play ball.
Well, and you have no leverage. Right? I mean, you give up all your leverage, particularly if you have no energy independence whatsoever. I mean, which is where they're going with this. This is the thing that drives me so nuts. It's not just simply if you don't produce oil and gas in this country that you don't become energy independent. We're also transferring everything they're talking about with electric cars and everything else is an inherent transfer of our energy overseas. So it's not, I mean, it's like the green agenda as they formulate it is inherently a energy dependence on the rest of the world.
But the transformation that they want, I think, requires scarcity. Like what you were saying earlier, Holmes, about their worldview, and how they've sort of deprioritized, oil and gas. Like that worldview informs the reason why Granholm is not sitting there at the meeting in Saudi Arabia, right? So like they did this on purpose, and they want that scarcity on purpose to remake the American energy economy, right? I mean,
I think that's right, which makes the faux outrage so much more unbelievable.
So much more faux. But I would even take that a step further. I think they think our energy production is an unfair advantage for us.
Get out of here.
And
you think they think that?
Yeah, and that they think, and this goes back to the Obama administration and even the Carter administration, if you restrain America's advantages, you enable the rest of the world, and you provide a good example of restraint, and you don't dominate, and you don't throw your weight around and demand all of your priorities. So I think they see this just as a net positive, that they want to tamp this down. They want it to basically go away.
So this is interesting. I want to tap into that just for a minute, because you work closely in this world and as a national security component too. You're telling me that they believe good foreign policy, and I used the words, I'm sorry.
National security.
But they believe good national and just relations across the world requires a weakened America?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
I think
about that.
But I mean, it's so true. It's the basis of the Iran deal, that we have to restrain ourselves. We have to step back. And I think the idea is that good example, I mean, I'm hopeful that they have some kind of logic like this, that a good example will encourage others to good behavior. But the others, I mean, if you're talking about Putin or the Ayatollahs, they're not really going to embrace good behavior.
I mean, we've been shutting down coal plants in this country since who knows when. I haven't seen the Chinese slow down.
No, they're expanding. And so are the Germans.
Right, you can't even count on like our supposed allies to be on the same page with us here. I mean, Donald Trump himself went to the UN and said, Germany, you're going to be relying on Russian energy. And they all laughed in his face. And now we are just a few years later, and look at what happened.
Yeah, they got a hell of a problem.
Yeah.
I was there in 2018 for UNGA.
Really?
For the General Assembly. We did two with Trump, 18 and 19. And it was embarrassing. I mean, sitting over with the U.S. delegation and watching the Germans, because my other boss, Ted Cruz, had been the spearhead of the sanctions against Nord Stream in Congress, and it's something he worked very closely with the administration on, got them passed, shut that thing down. And then Biden decided not to enforce them anymore because the Germans said, oh, the Russians need to sell us gas more than we need to buy it.
But
that didn't turn out.
Oh, man. What a short-sighted deal.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to sort of puzzle you in some ways, being a part of the Trump administration, where so many of the things that you guys were working on, you're entirely correct with the benefit of hindsight. You got no credit for it at the time, and no credit now.
No, and the other thing for the environmentalists is the Trump administration lowered emissions more than any other administration in history.
But nobody knew that.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we did not fully make the case. And, you know, the data is there, and it's mostly the conversion to natural gas. One funny thing about coal I wanted to raise is, in my home state of Pennsylvania, we do generate from coal, mostly natural gas, also oil. And we sell that coal-generated electricity to New York every day, which has a prohibition in generating electricity from coal.
That's amazing.
And I was with a state senator recently. He said, if I could figure out a way to stamp it, made from clean Pennsylvania coal, I would do it. It was a great moment. But it's so hypocritical. You're still buying coal-generated electricity. But you're too lily white, and that's the position the Germans put them in. It's where New York's putting themselves. It's where California's putting themselves. I was thrilled today to see Glenn Youngkin come out against this evil regional greenhouse gas initiative.
Oh, yeah, thank God.
Because the Pennsylvania legislature, I should be able to say that word, sued to keep Pennsylvania out of RGGI because our evil governor is trying to force us into it right now. And there is an injunction against it, and so I think that encouraged Youngkin to try to get Virginia out of it because it's the devil.
So this is the sort of trigger that basically would make Virginia accountable to everything that happens in California, right?
Because it's going so well.
This is the lefties. This is the way they do things. When you can't actually pass the legislation, you just look at California. You're like, well, if they do it, then we do it. Sound good? Good. All right, move on. And then California sticks a political gun in their mouth every single chance they can, and makes your state basically uninhabitable. I mean, that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I'm sure we're going to miss California when it drifts into the sea, and it's a shame. I mean,
Nevada's going to have a great view at that point.
They will have a good view, and I'm married to a liquor dealer, and I know he's going to be sorry about it. But we'll find other sources for wine, sweetie. But it's just mind-boggling that they could take that beautiful place and just destroy it.
Yeah.
I mean,
with just a total commitment to. I mean, every time something doesn't work, they double down on it.
I can't wait to get to the 20th of September. You know they can't water their plants until the 20th. So Los Angeles is literally going to be brown.
Oy.
Like, dead.
I did not know that.
They put a prohibition because on top of the electricity stuff, they also screwed up a water pipe. They won't do the civil nukes, so they can't do desalination from the Pacific. So they're dependent on others for their water, and now there's no water.
That is unbelievable. So no energy and no water.
No water, yeah.
What's the deal with the blackouts now that we're hearing about in California?
Well, they're a third grade alert, which is sort of it's not quite code orange, but we're getting there. And
we're talking like Enron days of rolling blackouts?
And you have Gavin Newsom coming out and saying, please turn your...
it literally is
78.
It's literally the Jimmy Carter, put on his sweater and turn down the heat.
Even worse, there's some smart home thermostats. I read an article that were basically controlling temperature on your behalf.
No.
That you could not control because you had checked a box on your agreement with the power company to opt in to this community energy management system where, now basically the government and your utility company is in control of your thermostat, not you.
We get the nasty grams from the PECO, from the Pennsylvania Energy Company, saying, here's your energy use and here's your thrifty neighbors.
Yeah.
And here are the
you're supposed to feel bad about that.
I mean, how about a thank you note for being a good customer? Good grief.
I like it 68, and that's just the way I'm going to roll.
And I'm an American, and I thought I was free to set my own thermostat, but maybe
seriously,
not.
especially when you're paying for it. It's just incredible. Before I transition into it, because I have a lot of national security questions for you, I want to get your view of the world at large, but I see you've brought something here. And I'm staring at it, and I'm not going to be able to do another segment until I can figure out what's in this box.
Well, for the benefit of the listeners, it's not a box. It's a Phillies cooler because we're very...
I was trying to denigrate it.
We're on Philadelphia brand today. But please, Josh, open it up.
Okay, all right. Uh-oh, we've got beer in here and a bottle of booze.
So the beer is very close to my heart. There was a Marine named Travis Manion who was killed in Iraq in 2007 out in Al Anbar. Under extraordinarily heroic circumstances, he drew the enemy fire and sacrificed himself for his company, and he was the only one to die. And he grew up in Doylestown, which is about 10 miles from where we live. And his family, which of course suffered this truly grievous loss, has formed the Travis Manion Foundation. Y'all can find it at travismanion.org. They do wonderful things for veterans' families, among other causes, and they've started this beer as a benefit. And the Phillies,
this is amazing.
Yeah, the Phillies serve it down at CBP. The Eagles, if they can make enough.
Yeah, wait, that's
Eagles fans are enthusiastic about the beer.
Beer and batteries, from what I understand.
Yes, well, and we don't like Santa Claus, and there are all these things. But they're going to serve it. It'll be at the Army-Navy game. It's a great way to express, support for Travis, support for the foundation.
These cans are incredible.
Yeah, the cans are badass.
I mean, this is it's a flag, and it's if not me, then who? Blonde Ale.
It's actually a story from an Eagles game where right before he went on his final deployment, Travis was at the Eagles game with, I believe, his brother-in-law, who joked with him, I should push you down the steps and you can sprain your ankle and not have to go. And he got quiet and he said, if not me, if not I, who?
Oh, man. This is a hero if there ever was one.
Absolutely. And so I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a really profound thing for us in Philadelphia, and I'll join you.
Yeah, please do. I mean, it tastes terrific. This is a refreshing blonde ale.
That's travismanion.org is the website.
And Co-Hops is their partner up in Doylestown that brews the beer, and I went up and visited with them, and they were actually fans of the Ruthless podcast.
Is that right?
They are.
Well, you tell them anytime they want to come on and hawk their stuff, I'm more than willing. I think all of us would welcome them with open arms, because it is really good beer.
I know. If nothing else, you're getting a quality product.
Yeah.
So
wow. I mean, what a great story.
Well, thank you for letting me do that. It's important to us locally, and I did not know Travis, but just have nothing but the greatest admiration for the family.
How can you not? What an incredible story! What an incredible beer, man! I'm going to be a customer from here on out. Can I get it shipped to me? I mean,
well, I'll talk to the co-hops people. That's the problem, and they literally need more brewery partners to produce.
Well, we got listeners who are interested in that sort of thing. So, look.
There are links online if y'all know.
Shoot us a note. We're happy to connect anybody with anybody.
Now, the other object is courtesy of my husband, the booze hound, who is a big gin drinker. I have generally not been...
So he's in the booze business?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great thing to marry into.
I married up.
I mean, this is like, you got stocked cabinets, no problem, right? Great wine.
Not our happiest, but that my father always used to say to my mother, which drove her crazy on their anniversary if they'd been married for 48 years. He'd say, Annie, to 37 happy years. drove her completely insane. But our early days when he was a wine salesman in Center City, Philadelphia, and he would come home every day with the bag of the half-opened wine bottles, and you'd have to drink.
Oh, yeah. I mean, imagine.
It would be wasteful.
Yeah. It would be wasteful. You're wearing energy.
And you want to learn. You want to learn about the wines.
Yeah.
It nose to the grindstone.
So this is Blue Coat.
Yes.
Elderflower dry gin.
It is a local gin product. They've been doing exceptionally well.
This is a Pennsylvania deal too?
Philadelphia.
It
says so on the top of the cap.
Wow. I mean, you should get like a marketing bonus for the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, this is look at that, and it's nice and chilled too.
And I brought you tonic just in case you wanted to mix.
Really thoughtful presentation.
I'm married to a liquor dealer. What do you expect?
I don't know, Victoria.
If I screwed this one up, there would be no end of it in the home.
Victoria, I think you should come back and have a weekly segment. I think this is exactly what we need.
I don't know how much good stuff we produce in Pennsylvania, but we could, hunt around the world.
We'll hunt around. We'll go anywhere. Okay. All right, so let's get back to business for a second.
Okay.
Deputy National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And with that comes a bunch of challenges. Initially because much of the, quote-unquote foreign policy establishment didn't want him there in the first place. Didn't think that he had any idea what he was talking about, ignored all of his ideas, and then basically pieces of the national security apparatus actively going after a sitting president of the United States. You're in the middle of that trying to navigate that whole deal. That had to have been a very tricky deal.
It was a wild time because I was on the transition and then went on the NSC day one, and you'll remember what happened. The first thing that happened to us is the NSC was the blob came for General Flynn. And so
that's right.
After 3 weeks, suddenly General Flynn, who's the one who hired me, is gone, literally in the night. And then suddenly in comes H.R. McMaster, who oddly enough was getting an honorary sort of not degrees the wrong word, but honorary membership, I guess, into my husband's National Guard unit in Philadelphia. The weekend all that happened, we happened to be in Palm Beach. Huh. And George looked at me and said, "Who's H.R. McMaster?"
I guess he's my
I was like, boss. I said, "I think he's my." He's now a member of the first Philadelphia First City Troop Cavalry. But so we had the second transition with HR. You get to know a new boss. That goes on for a year and a half. We start down the impeachment road. That was just catastrophic in terms of President Trump's views of the NSC. Well,
it fell directly in your line of responsibility, right? I mean, so at that point, if everybody recalls, it had to do with a Ukrainian phone call, basically, and much was made out of not a whole hell of a lot, but I got to imagine that puts you in an impossible position to try to figure out how to navigate the politics of everything that's happening on Capitol Hill and their attempts to take down President Trump with the actual serious policy that you're responsible for.
Well, I was mostly in Middle East issues and certainly interested in Ukraine for a variety of reasons. But as that sort of started to burble and explode, and I mean, I was, not to make myself sound more important than I am, but I was on a lot of our calls with President Trump. And, he has his own personal style, which is unique.
Yeah, it's not reading from the 3-ring binder.
He is not reading from the 3-ring binder. But, he would certainly absorb, your pre-call comments. These are the things I think are priorities. And he had a great way of working those into what otherwise would seem like very jovial conversations. And the other thing that's not well known about him is the relationships he was able to establish with a lot of these world leaders, many of whom are not easy to deal with. But they liked him. They liked him. They felt like he was a straight shooter. He made our jobs easier because they felt like they had a line to him. I mean, he would always take a call.
Yeah.
And, he wasn't thrilled about the whole, secret line thing, because he was like, I can just take it from my cell phone on the golf course. Like, I'm sorry, sir. No, that's not going to work. But I think he would have been a lot happier had he been sort of untethered to do it more freely. But he did put a lot of time into it, and it was extremely valuable to all of us. And that is generally not acknowledged as a way he gave his team a lot of cover, because the heads of state knew they could reach out to him and get him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was very. I remember, what was the one phone call? The top of the memo, you may have even been a part of it. There was like, do not congratulate. Yeah. Good. Putin won his reaction. Do not congratulate. It's like, congratulations.
Yeah.
That was the fastest way to have that happen. Is
you put do not something on the top, and that happens 100% of the time.
Absolutely. So I mean, maybe we should have done reverse psychology.
That's really funny.
No, but it was really extraordinary being on the NSC from my perspective, because he was willing to do things that conventional wisdom said were completely impossible. Yeah. And I'd start with moving the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, because I had worked on that issue with Senator Cruz. We were lead on Heller-Cruz, the Jerusalem Recognition Act, and kept saying, we really think it's time. And we got the same briefing that everyone had gotten, that the streets were going to run with blood, and the sky was going to fall, and the Arabs were going to attack, and this was a horrible thing for Israel. And David Friedman, God love him, he was in Philadelphia last month endorsing Dr. Oz, which was a great thing to do. But David just said, look, this is not Israel of 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we need to give the Arab world clarity on where the United States stands with Israel, and this is the way to do it.
Well said.
Yeah.
And we did it, and the streets did not run with blood, and the sky did not fall.
Yeah, it worked out just fine.
Just fine.
It's amazing.
So you were very involved in the Middle East, obviously, and so I kind of wanted to ask you about, with Iraq in particular, the media, a lot in the media, and I think like Jim Sciutto, chief among them, sort of mocked this idea of a quote-unquote deep state, right, that would undermine President Trump. But then in the same breath would say things like, generals or people in the intel community, sort of secretly undermined the president and kept him from getting out of Iraq, or kept him from making a decision he wanted to make in foreign policy. And I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? I always found that to be one of the most underreported parts of the Trump administration, is how much the president was sort of undermined by people within the administration and like
within the intel community.
Well, and this isn't a Trump specific thing, but like I think the American people elect a president for the president to have broad latitude to implement their agenda. Like how much of the bureaucracy makes that impossible or very unlikely? I just,
Good question.
I mean, because this blob, if you will, you referenced it earlier.
It makes it very hard, but certainly not impossible. And where those of us who went through the administration now have a great advantage going forward is we know where the good careers are. And they exist. These people are patriots. They've poured their lives into this service. That does exist. And lumping them all together is going to be a recipe for failure. You need to be able to understand that your folks are there. Now, there's a reason that the Biden NSC people walked into NSC Human Relations the day after the election was called and said, here are my 60 files. I want these people in January. They know exactly who they want. Mm-hmm. We had no idea going into the Trump administration. And most of the Bush administration people who would have come with us had taken themselves off the table with all the Never Trump stuff,
right?
Yeah,
which was deeply unfortunate.
Great job, everybody.
Let's not do that again.
Don't
please. If I get one message out
If I see one more letter signed by 50 people who've now taken themselves out of contention for working in a Republican administration, I'm going to puke.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that Senator Cruz said to us in the summer of 16, he said, I have my issues with the candidate. Those are my issues.
Yeah, if anybody does, it was him, right?
Right.
But I don't want to see you guys. I don't want you signing anything. I don't want to see you on the news.
Yeah.
This is not your fight.
Yeah.
I will fight it. And we will get, and then, the two of them came to their resolution, both of them patriots, and just let's not do that again.
Yeah.
So now those of us who were there, who do know, who would be supportive of the kind of policies we would look at, I think we can do a much better job of that.
Well, I certainly hope you're going to be a part of the transition team at SAG, because look, I mean,
I don't know, I'm getting fat and happy at Heritage.
It's sort of a specialized skill, right? Nobody talks about the importance of a transition team in terms of identifying and understanding what you've just explained to our audience. But that's the difference between being able to do what you want to do and not doing anything at all, or winding up in impeachment trials.
Absolutely. And the other thing that what happened with President Trump prevented us from explaining is once we got the NSC cleansed of blob elements, we had to be his tool.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I mean, and I saw this from DOE, the departments and agencies will just run amok.
Yeah, they just do what they're going to do, unless somebody tells them not to.
Unless you've got a hammer at the NSC.
Yeah.
The real quick illustration of that is when we designated the Iranian Islamic Republican Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a foreign terrorist organization. The only reason we got that done is I was able to call PCC meetings every Friday at 5:30 in person. So all y'all who want to debate this, you can come over to the White House at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon. Took 6 weeks.
That's a great story.
And they caved.
That's like lining up late July votes in Congress.
It's exactly like that. Like, okay.
Well, we're good with it. Yeah. I'm totally fine with that. I've got a vacation planned. Oh,
I'm going to the ballet.
That's amazing. So, you're at Heritage now. Mm-hmm. And you may not know anything. You may not want to touch this topic at all. But I figured, given your background, you may have some insight. I mean, everyone's talking about the classified documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago, and there's speculation yesterday about the contents of those and that they were highly classified. Here's my question. If they are as sensitive as we now are led to believe by the Washington Post, how do you just walk out of the White House with a box of that?
Well,
isn't it somebody's job?
Yeah, yes, it is. And I actually did C-SPAN Washington Journal this morning.
Oh, so I'm second place, but we'll take it.
No, you were booked well before them. We took some calls, so I got the people's views from both sides.
I bet they take both sides.
I was called a fascist several times. It's a little surprising, but my grandfather's second wave D-Day. We've kind of been Nazi hunters, but
you should tell them about your art history degree.
I'm sure that they would be shocked. The classification system, and what's interesting to me is the Biden NSC is currently doing a review of the classification system and how things are classified and how they're declassified and how classification can be used as a bludgeon. Now, those documents, if they are what they say they are, should have basically been tracked. There are very few physical copies. In some cases, there's only one. In some cases, there might be 2 or 3, but whatever they are, they're tracked. So if they knew they had left the complex, when they went in April, they should have had all those document numbers.
They would have known.
And just said, here, give me all your 7s.
Well, this is this is the thing that blows my mind, right? Because in that same article in the Washington Post, it says, it's highly secret. In some cases, some of the documents are only kept in a safe inside a SCIF. And for those of you who don't know what the SCIF is, it's a classified room, totally sort of uncontaminated. In a safe, can't just be in the SCIF, had to be in the safe in the SCIF. Well, if that is the case, how the hell did they end up at Mar-a-Lago?
And that's also bizarre because our offices in the EEOB were SCIFs.
Yeah.
So our stuff, there was certain stuff that could be in your office. There was certain stuff that had to live up in Intel spaces. it's not complicated. You've got to it's a pain. You got to double wrap it. You got to move it around. If you want to take it over to the White House and just go across west of exec, there's a whole protocol for that. But, I can't speak to the particulars of this. I just say, I never saw President Trump be cavalier with classified information.
But how would he even get it? I mean,
I don't...
Like, take the motives out of it, why he wanted it or why it was there. Take that all aside. Physically, how in the world would you get a document?
Like, you just empty the Resolute desk and you put it in a banker's box?
Seriously.
Like, how does this happen?
Here's my little illustrative example. Because I like working for the shy retiring types, another former boss is Don Rumsfeld. And when he came out of the Pentagon in 2006, and I was his archivist, so up to the end of his life, he used to call me when he would forget things about himself.
Yeah, right.
Which was always fun. Like, can you remember my batting average and the Coney Cubs? 242. And I tried to elevate it, but he was so concerned because DOD had done a digitized version of his Chronicle of Tenure for 01 to 06. And, so we weren't receiving physical documents. We were getting...
You're getting it over the internet.
Digitized.
Yeah.
And so... And even controlling that material was incredibly difficult. So he went after the sort of classification authority and made them design a stamp. And you'll see it if you go on rumsfeld.com and look at any of those documents. In the lower corner, there's a stamp with a horse on it, which is his 1988 emblem for running for president, the dark horse, saying this document's unclassified. Regardless of its marking, because he was terrified that something had just migrated
just
over.
Slipped through.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he can't
as one would be as a defense secretary, right?
And that's a defense secretary. This is a president. And, if somebody is meticulous and, interested in these things as DR, would have that concern. I can see how various things can get shuffled together. I wasn't in the White House then, so I can't speak to the specifics, but it wouldn't be shocking to me to learn that might happen. But then the National Archives should have known when they walked in the first time, this is what we want.
And like you said, they track the documents,
right,
or should it, something that classified would have to be tracked.
The CIA should be screaming their heads off, or whoever produced it.
Exactly. Well, I guess that was kind of the point that I was getting to. If anything is that classified, how in the world does it take you
How does it go this far?
A year and a half to get
and why
back
is
to
suddenly in August? Like, we have to have it.
Right. None of this story makes any sense to me. There's got to be just leagues of information that we don't know.
And that's really where this becomes so problematic. Is it becomes a rule of law issue. What does Christopher Wray have to say? What does Merrick Garland have to say? Why have they been so clammed up about this? We need some transparency and clarity on how this all went down, what they're actually after. And if they have a case against the president, make it. But now we've been in limbo for over a month.
And we're learning about it in the Washington Post and New York Times. Like, don't these guys have an obligation to go grab a microphone and do a briefing?
No, apparently leaking to the same group that they leaked all the Rushgate stuff.
Which makes all of us, what you just said is what makes all of us so skeptical, right? Because for 4 years we read about
100%
absolute fiction in both of those newspapers. And now it kind of feels like a here we go again. But I don't know that.
No. And it's very, very damaging going into the midterms.
Oh, it's incredible. All right. Well, listen, I could talk to you for 2 days about all the... I do have 3 big questions that we ask all of our guests, okay? The first one, your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
So the predicate to that, and I was very impressed by Devin's answer when he was on, that he'd pick the wine first.
Oh, yeah. No, he was very, very serious about that.
And so that got me to thinking about it, and my predicate is that my husband has to cook it. Because he is also a trained chef.
This guy.
I know.
Can I marry this guy? This guy sounds great.
You might want to have him on. Because he is also the chair of the Commonwealth Foundation, so he knows a lot about Pennsylvania politics. So George has to cook it. But I would have, this is going to come as a surprise, but pork, sauerkraut, mashed potatoes, and carrots, which is what we eat in Lancaster County every New Year's Day.
That is very local.
And you can take the girl out of Lancaster County, but you can't take Lancaster County out of the girl.
There is evidence of that. Absolutely. All right. So second question. If you never got into this line of work at all, right? And you've had iterations of this line of work for a while. Your resume is incredible. but no public service, no politics, no national security, all that stuff. And you have this big blue sky that you could fill it with absolutely anything. What would it be?
Be a successful art historian. No, I think I would go into sports management. I would love to be front office for the Phillies, do government relations for the team. I would extend that. My sister, but for bloodline, is a senior exec in the Flyers organization, and I just...
God, you really are. You're a big Pennsylvania gal, huh?
We are wired in.
Yeah, you're
serious about it. Yeah. But I would love to do something like that.
That is fun.
It brings so much joy to so many people, and come on, Phillies.
Yeah.
Don't tank now.
Yeah, okay, I'm certainly not going to join you in that. All right, so third question. You know what's coming. I'll explain a little bit. Obviously, it's what motivates you more, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. As you know, nobody enjoys defeat. It's what motivates you. It's either the glass half full or every victory you've ever had lasts like 3 seconds, but every defeat that you've ever had, you carry around like a backpack and use it as motivation to improve and get better. Where do you find yourself?
It's agony of defeat.
Yeah,
all the way. I keep lists.
Yeah.
I may forgive. I never forget.
Oh yeah.
And what else is, I want to call bullshit on all the happy warriors. They're liars. No one does that sort of Pollyanna-ish. Pollyanna wasn't that Pollyanna-ish.
Not at this level, right?
No, you got to, as I said, you got to keep lists and keep those people out of your life. And I would say Michael Jordan, we watched that documentary.
Wasn't it
with
amazing?
Our son.
Yeah.
I mean, that man took 20 years to go back and dust off every grievance.
Yeah.
Impressive.
And it's like they were happening yesterday.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you can watch him get mad as he talks about it. No,
Good
it's
stuff.
truly
Good
he's
stuff.
he's the personification of it. You no surprise at all that you find yourself in that category. Where can people keep up with your work at Heritage?
Absolutely at Heritage on Twitter, at Victoria Coates, and it's just been a great pleasure. You guys are a joy in our week every week, and
I'm so glad to hear
having me
that.
on.
Listen, stay in touch.
Of course.
As big events need explanation of these simple minds, we'd appreciate if you could come back from time to time.
Yeah, and bring booze.
Yeah, right.
It's my special gift.
From heroes, no less. From heroes.
Thank you for
Awesome.
that.
Thanks so much, Victoria.
Pleasure.